And welcome to this episode of Trust or Bust, where Moeed, Amin, and myself talk about trust in a professional sales capacity and where salespeople can make mistakes, but also what they can do to make it really work for them. So, we've spoken about some elements, including opening a sales meeting and how to get that up and running. And in this podcast, we want to talk about the questioning phase. Questioning is massive in selling. There's
Mm.
lots spoken about this. Um, so rather than telling everyone straight away what to do, let's just reflect on what can potentially go wrong. Where can trust be bust? So, Moeed, tell me, what do you see or what do you think is kind of one of the big failures that salespeople can make?
Yeah, question. Like you said, it's a big one, right? And it's questions. We get questions about how to ask questions, right? And we
Mm.
hear about it all the time, right? It's there are quite a few mistakes, but let's see. Let's pick one for now, which is structure. Lack of structure in the questioning process. You can,
Structure of
yeah.
questioning process.
So,
Okay, yeah.
and what can lack of structure feel like to the buyer, and why should that be important to you? One, it could feel like an interrogation. The
Uh-huh.
buyer's like, it's almost like an interrogation or a questionnaire. And we all know how we feel about interrogations and questionnaires, right? We avoid them as much as we can, right?
Yeah,
So the buyer will feel, and if the buyer feels like that, guess what? You're not going to get information that you're going to find vital towards your sales process, right? You're just not going to get that important information. So it's going
yeah,
to harm you badly. So that's probably one of the main, not the main, but it's one that I see, which is lack of structure, which leads to interrogation or questionnaire feeling, or at the worst end of the spectrum, it's lack of structure means that the buyer is just totally confused as to where you're going. They're answering questions about one particular area, and then all of a sudden about another, and you're kind of forgetting that. That means that they don't trust you because you don't know what you're doing,
yeah,
right? And there's no thought, there's no measured process, which means that your actions as a supplier are going to be that confusing, right? It's going to be haphazard, and they're just not going to feel like they're in a safe pair of hands.
yeah.
That's one of the big ones. What others are you seeing,
No,
Fred?
I'm just going to violently agree with those. In that, if you're going into the meeting and you're asking questions because you need information, you're missing the point of a modern sales meeting.
Yeah.
The checklist, the questionnaire, almost like the qualification criteria, whatever you want to call them,
Mm,
that isn't for the meeting. Sorry, but stuff has moved on, stuff has changed. You might do little bits that just help you be sure about certain things. But really, for me, the purpose of the meeting is to help the customer, help the buyer to understand things better. So again, if you're saying that if you get this wrong, can leave them confused, it's like a double whammy. You do complete opposite of what you're trying to do. The info isn't for
mm.
you. The questioning and the thinking is for them. So we
That's
really do
interesting.
not want that to happen. That's how I see questioning now. It there's enough info that we can get out there. You've heard me say this before. I'm a bit of a stuck record. So yeah, I'll go with you on those. And for me, it is questioning structure and
Mm.
thinking about where it's going that helps us to do that.
Yeah, that's really interesting to mention that. So it's almost as if you're saying you're not asking questions so that you can uncover information. You're asking questions to help the buyer learn and uncover critical information for themselves.
Yeah,
But at the same time, you're uncovering information for yourself as well.
it is because
But the
well,
primary
hopefully we're
purpose
going
is
to
for
work.
them.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, 'cause hopefully we're going to work together to fix that. So okay, yeah, I need to do something about that now. And you don't say, oh, bad luck.
That's super
What a
interesting.
mess you're in, unlucky. It's like, well, guess what? That is what we do. That's why I'm so interested in it because we can help with that stuff. We can work together. So
That's really interesting.
it's it's the sort of the I won't say the physio the other day, and it's just like sat down date of birth, it's like, well, come on, the backers, get on with doing the stuff to help me get better, you
Yes.
know. And it wasn't by understanding when I was born and the rest of it. So yeah, that's how I think, in a more complex B2B sale, that's what questioning's for. That's what we're trying to do.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so how we plan that, how we structure it to get that thinking that we can both benefit from, that's where we, that's where we're ultimately going back to trust. We build trust because it's like, well, this person, yeah, I can trust in them because they get me. They're asking me stuff to help me think. They're on my side. We're in this together. They're not trying to wheedle little bits of information out that they might use in a surreptitious way that I don't know why they're doing that. That's how I think anyway.
And do you feel, and I know what your answer is going to be to this question, do you feel questioning happens at a certain stage in the sales process, or is it throughout?
Does it or should it?
Let's start with, does it?
Well, sometimes it just doesn't, because people are going, oh, my job's to do demos. My job's to show people stuff. I'm a salesperson. I speak. To be fair, I think we're seeing less of that. Well, I hope we are.
Right.
Because, again, let's go back to that medical analogy. It's prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. You've got to, the physio could tell me to do all sorts of stuff. Oh, I want to do those. They really hurt those exercises. Well, I've worked out what's wrong with you. This is what it is. And this is why you've got to do those exercises that hurt. Because actually it will stop you hurting ultimately. Couldn't do that without that kind of understanding and that questioning at the beginning part of the process. Same maps into professional selling. We should be asking early. So opening, good solid opening like we talked about, and then you're into questioning.
Interesting.
That's what I see.
And I think there are levels of questioning as well, right? There's questioning where you're trying to understand whether this is a partnership that's going to work for the both of you. There's questioning where you're trying to understand maybe a bit more about their business. But there's also questioning where you can understand, and this is where the more sophisticated sellers come in, which is understanding it's not about the buying landscape. It's more about how can I need to understand the situation on their side to see how I can help them make that buying process as easy and as painless as possible. Because let's face it, buyers hate buying. If you've ever sat down with a bunch of buyers and asked them to go through the buying process with you, you would very quickly gather that they absolutely hate it because it's complex. It requires them to do a lot of extra work. They have to get involved with a lot of people in the business, and let's face it, some of whom they don't enjoy working with, right? It happens. And also there's a lot of emotion involved in the buying process because they're strongly communicating their perspective that someone else disagrees with, right? They're also putting their own reputation on the line sometimes, right? Because they're making the recommendation and therefore they have to almost kind of do the rounds in the business. It's almost like a lobbying trade show. So understand, I think questions where you can understand that buyer landscape and then help him or her in that buying process is also a different level that's often overlooked by salespeople.
Yeah, and all those things you said, but buying isn't easy. If we're demonstrating, rather than saying, look, I know all these things, this is what you got to do, blah 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 blah. That going back to our trust piece isn't going to necessarily help you build trust as much as by asking questions to get you talk about it, agreeing, showing I want to understand. And I think a good question can actually demonstrate quite a lot of knowledge in itself anyway. Right. A good salesperson can ask a question that makes somebody kind of go, whoa, you must know your stuff and what we do to ask us that in the first place.
Right.
Yeah. And one of the best things a salesperson can say is, well, that's a really good question. And I was like, I feel myself warming to you because you're asking me things that are helping me. I'm clearer because you're drawing out of me stuff that I did kind of know. But that's how I think that we can build trust from questioning.
Yeah, agreed. That's why it's interesting. So the good questions are those that if I'm hearing what you're saying, good questions are those that makes the buyer think, firstly, helps the buyer think about things in a different way that they probably haven't, which we talked about in the opening episode.
Yeah. And
the second part, which is these are tough questions that are making them really reflect, and it might even make them feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it's what my mentor used to call constructive tension, right?
Yeah.
So let me ask you then, Fred, can you share some examples or some ideas, some practical ideas about how to structure the questioning process, or what kinds of questions are the really good types of questions?
Sure. I mean, the way that I would kind of escalate questioning in the way I train it, if you like, is, we start off, we talk about open and closed questions. Yeah. So,
Right.
yes, no answers, and ones that give you a more variable answer. So the W's, what, where, when, why, who,
Yes.
how, what. It's got W on it. So that counts as a
Yes.
W in my mind. Another little version of that is TED, tell me, explain, describe. So you can use those as your sort of your foundation, they're your building blocks. Yeah, now you can take the building blocks and you can start to work them into different ways, different language patterns. So we've got open, closed, but if we think, well, my job is to really sort of dig down here, and I can start to be far more probing with it and very deliberately kind of ask, why is that? Or tell me more about it. Describe. It's actually the question itself. Forming a question isn't necessarily the hard bit. It's the how you take it, where you take it, and the information that's coming out from that. So it is giving people time to reflect. If we really want to help people think, there's another way that can be quite useful. It can be frustrating if we get it wrong, but asked at the right time, a hypothetical question can be quite useful. So if. So we now add the if language pattern. So we've got what, why, where, when, who, how. Tell, explain, describe, and then if at the beginning of a sentence. So if we had a blank sheet of paper, how would you go about doing this? Yeah. If you were your boss's boss, if you were running the company, how would you do this sort of thing? If we were sat in 3 years' time and you're saying, Fred, it's just been brilliant working with you, what would I have done?
Yeah, that's
Quite
a good
a bit of
one.
a cheeky one, but anything hypothetical is quite useful because it then just starts to expand the mind a little bit. So kind of bringing them together like that, and just having that intent that I'm not just going to ask a couple because somebody told me on a course and it's killing a bit of time till I get to talk about myself. Is I really want to not only know for myself, so I'm curious, but I want them to reflect and to think that's a good bloke to speak with, because whenever we talk, I always come back having thought more. It's like that thing you said in a previous episode, isn't it, about the sort of leaving a conversation smarter? And it's like, I keep thinking of Mars bar now, but it does the same to the brain as having sugar.
Yeah. Well, new information. Yeah.
New information into the brain, and even if it's
Your
your own
brain
information
rewards
that
it.
you've managed to extract.
Yeah, it rewards new information in the same pathway as the reward for eating sugar. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Again, I still love that.
So yeah, I love it. And I learned it so long ago, and I still love it. So yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. So questions are a path to getting that new information, right?
But they are. It's not just going, here's information, here's a bag of sweets, take them. It's, you've got these in you. The sugar's there. We can extract.
Really interesting. Yeah, I mean the four W's and H, as I call it, the what, why, when, how, that resonates with me the most, because that I found to have been most powerful for me. But I certainly think that questioning, the TED and the why and the if, etc., that you mentioned, to me they feel like tactics, and I think a lot of salespeople forget the strategy and they dive right into the tactics, but with no direction and no plan. And I think that's where a lot of them fall short. The first thing for me is, and you use that word curiosity, right? Your intention, and you talk about this a lot actually, Fred, your intention will determine your outcome in a lot of ways. So if your intention is to ask questions to maneuver someone into a sales process, or to uncover information that you can then use to then sell to them, then you're not going to get very far. But if your intention is genuine curiosity about the person and the business and their situation, you're going to find that actually you're going to be more curious and also a bit more courageous and bold to dig a little deeper, particularly if they are smart questions. So for me, I thought mindset and your intention is really important. But then the other thing is the altitude of the questions that you're asking, right? So I think of this in terms of, goals and objectives, And we used to have, in the previous company I worked with, they talked about mission critical priorities, right? So what are the critical things that you're going to need to do, the critical levers that you're going to need to pull in order to achieve those objectives? And then who is going to be doing the work that leads to those mission critical priorities? And I think if, questioning isn't just about what you ask the buyer, it's also what you ask yourself, which is, what do I know about this company right now? What do I know about the buyer? What do I know about how all those things fit together? And then how do all those things fit in with what we can do? Because most sellers focus on their solution as the absolute, the be all and end all. But what they forget is that their solution is a tiny, or maybe a portion, right? A portion of a whole contribution. And it's understanding how that portion fits in with everything else that enables you to ask smart questions, right? So understand, figure out, what is this person's objective and priority, right? What are their KPIs? How are they even going to be assessed in terms of their bonus and rewards and things like that? What are they currently using? Some of that information you can find out yourself, and then the smart questions are going to be incrementally valuable questions that you ask because you've already done your homework, right? One of the other big mistakes I see salespeople make, which is, tell me about this, or describe to me about this, which is not a bad question in itself. It's bad when it's something that you could have found out yourself.
Yeah.
And I think most people think about questioning as, what do I ask the buyer? Whereas I tell people, questioning are also what you ask yourself. What can I find out about this company? How can I find out that information? Why is that information important? You will find that actually buyers respond really well to more incremental, focused questions based upon homework that you've already done that's now validated, as opposed to, tell me about this. And then your buyer is not going to say, well, this person's curious. Okay, this person's curious, maybe, but they could have figured this information out for themselves. Why they're wasting my time?
Yeah, tell me about this. Sit back, popcorn. It's a bit lazy. Whereas I've looked at what you guys doing. I can see that you do this and this. I understand it to be with this reason. But tell me about why you guys think you do it, or how you contribute to that. Totally different. Totally different. Tell me. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Tell me about something a little bit more specific. Or just tell me stuff.
Yeah. So don't be afraid to show that you've done that homework. Be careful about not making it a regurgitation exercise either, right? So we talked about this in the previous session on the opening, which is, give them a different perspective, right? Give them a unique perspective on a situation, right? Open them up to a potential problem or challenge that's unforeseen, or an opportunity that they're missing out that's unforeseen, right? So start off with that before you start to do the confirmation thing, because people get bored by things that they already know. But don't be afraid to talk about the things that you know, right? So we've uncovered this, and I see this, and I'm seeing this in other companies as well. I noticed that you've invested in this particular thing. And a lot of companies we talk about are expecting these kind of returns from that particular investment. But looking at your financial statements, I'm seeing that you may not be getting that. Can you just tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah. No. Brilliant. So we've got tactics. Yes, we've got to use the tactics to then plug into the strategy that is really going to make the business.
The direction, yeah.
Gives you the direction, and it is tending then to be looking at their bigger picture. In doing that, you're somebody that's interesting to them, that's helpful to them, and that hopefully is easier for them to build trust with.
Absolutely. Cool. Absolutely.
Look, we could talk about questions.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Hours, but I think
I agree.
In what we're trying to do in keeping this short, punchy, and a couple of things around the trust bit in particular is good advice that we can leave people with.
Yeah, and they can, and obviously the listeners can have a look at some of the extra information that we both have about questioning on our websites and our blogs, etc. So if if they want to hear a bit more about this, because it is a big topic, like you say, very big topic. There's a science and both an art to it, and also humanity to it as well, right?
Yeah.
I encourage them to contact us to learn a bit more, because there's so much to talk about here. But yeah, I think
we've got to be disciplined.
But I think we've covered the salient points. Yes, mindset, direction, tactics, curiosity, those kind of things. Absolutely, yeah.
Brilliant. Cool.